I pulled up a Halloween soundboard.
I don't like that you did that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know what it was going to be, incidentally. That one just said, ah. It was the first one in alphabetical order.
Wow.
Some other options also relate in alphabetical order include ambiance. This one is called blood.
Okay.
Oh, gross.
I would call that squelching.
Yeah, what this seems like is when you go to the haunted house and they have the peeled grapes that they make you feel as eyeballs.
Yeah.
Well, we can break some more of these out throughout the episode. Happy Halloween, I guess. We're recording this the weekend before, but we're in the heart of the season. Do you feel spirited?
Not especially.
What about if I played the sound effect torture?
Well, that sounds pretty rough.
No! Well, that's pretty good, actually. Well, we're recording on a Sunday afternoon. Speaking of torture, I have big plans for tonight.
Tell us about your plans.
Well, I wasn't sure what order we were going to do this in today, but I think it's wise that we're recording first because then this is not Halloween related, although I guess it is somewhat appropriate. I have scheduled in for myself a 2-hour block this evening of being upset. It is on the calendar. It's on our kitchen whiteboard.
I mean, I support this experiment.
The careful listener will know that over the past couple of years, I have been, I guess I would say racked with anxieties, especially health related.
Wow, why do you think that would be?
I don't know what's been going on that would have caused that to be true, but I read about the technique in managing anxieties where you schedule a specific period of time where you will indulge those anxieties. But then, I scheduled it for this Sunday evening. I scheduled it last week. The idea is when you start to be anxious in the period leading up to the scheduled slot, you think to yourself, I don't need to do this right now because I have a time set aside to do this later on. And it's been working great, I've got to say. I've also created a Twitter list of just the people on my timeline that never talk about COVID-19, the novel coronavirus. And I have
the disease caused
by
the
novel coronavirus. Yeah. So I've not been exposed to any COVID related social media for the last week. Gotta say, it feels pretty good. But I look forward to absolutely doom scrolling.
So I'm curious, though, are you going to limit the topics of anxiety that you ponder? Or is it all things that make you upset?
So,
do you have a list?
I do have a list. A list of things to dwell on for that 2-hour block.
Whoa. I actually did not expect you to say yes to that.
But I'm allowing myself, if my brain moves elsewhere, like when you're doing guided meditation, they'll be like, if your brain moves elsewhere, just gently pull it back to the, thinking about the breath or whatever. Here I'm not pulling myself back. If my brain wants to go to consider something else horrible that I didn't anticipate, I'm allowing it to, but only for that 2-hour block. And then once that 2-hour block's over, gotta wait till next Sunday evening again.
Well, this would never work on me.
Which is Halloween. That sound effect is labeled kill you. I think that was a person moaning the phrase kill you.
A zombie, I think.
So anyway, I'm in good spirits because I have not yet entered this block of time to be upset. How are you feeling? If the answer isn't great, then why don't you feel bad later instead of now?
I don't think that's how it works for me. But I'm really impressed by your ability to do this.
What's going unsaid is that your brain doesn't do it because it's a better brain.
Oh, I don't think that's right at all.
And mine can be subdued, but your brain is ungovernable.
Well, yeah, my brain is ungovernable. I don't think that is a good thing in this case. I think it makes it worse.
Damn, I wish there was a sound effect that said brains. So that'd be a really good thing to go out on. But instead, I'm going to click moan, and then we'll start the episode. Wow, sexy.
Well, you're groanin.
And you're... Listen. And...
Wow. This is seedy business?
Yeah, and this spooktacular is seedy business. It's seedy business. It's seedy business.
Well, speaking of that, we are currently being haunted by a pervasive and lovely fragrance of jasmine in the air.
Oh, okay. I didn't know where you were going with that. I thought you might have been talking about how we've been speculating about our late cat Lucy haunting us. But
well, that too. Maybe she's part of the jasmine thing as well.
Yeah, so we have not planted any jasmine, and as far as we know,
we can't figure out where it is.
Yeah, but there is an overwhelming aroma of it
every night.
Or every night, and it is around our house and not it's definitely not coming from the neighbor's property. It's like it's right outside our door.
Yeah, it's incredible. It seems like
good.
It's really right outside our door.
Yeah. I mean, it's enjoyable.
I love it. I love jasmine. I wonder if it's in that sewer gulch or whatever that's right next to our house.
Wow, that doesn't make it quite as appealing when you put it that way. We have a little creek that runs next to our house.
Yeah.
Kids go down there and catch frogs and shit. I'm pretty convinced that an alligator is going to come out of it at some point.
Yeah, but it is like a storm water system, right? That's its function.
Yeah, presumably. It looks sort of nice.
I mean, I think it's great, and it means we got
don't
this
flood.
kind of...
Yeah.
Well, that too. I was going to say we have this sense when we're in our backyard that we're in a real semi-tropical jungle.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, we didn't do that, Jasmine. What have we done? What is in the garden?
Then let us cultivate our garden. It's the only way to make life endurable.
Well, I still have not gotten myself to attempt to plant any sort of fall garden, though I think it's clearly time.
It is time, and I think for next episode, we should try to germinate those seeds from the St. Johns County Seed Library that we talked about last time. We didn't get around to it, but I think we're going to try that.
But the hibiscus plant, which I was certain we had killed, seems to be making some sort of a comeback. I hope that continues. I think it needs to be transplanted to a bigger pot when it's a little more stable. It no longer seems certain that it will die. So that's great.
And that is a gardening triumph for us at the moment.
And that lavender plant that I mentioned that my coworker had given me that he said was the only, he tried 42 different kinds of lavender, and that was the only one that didn't die in this neighborhood. I thought I had forgotten to plant it and that it must be dead, but then I noticed in the garden that I did plant it at some point and it is still alive. I don't know if that happened before our last recording, but I think I only discovered it since then.
Yeah. We have a smattering of alive stuff.
Yeah.
That's alive. The strawberry plants are still alive.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping they would do a fall flowering because they said they might.
Yeah.
But they're not there's no evidence that they're going to flower this fall.
What's the cue for that, though? I mean, it's still 85 during the day out here. Does it have to get cooler at night for it to be triggered?
It's partly day length, the ratio of, day to night.
That's interesting. If day length being a cue, as you get nearer to the equator, that is there's less of a difference.
It's less relevant. I think so. I'm not a plant scientist, though I speculate wildly on this podcast. But I kind of think I remember from college biology that even though we call it day length, it's actually about the ratio of far red to
like
red light or something like that.
The angle of the sun rays and what that means for its component parts.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're right that it would still be diminished in importance the closer you get to the equator.
I'll tell you, man, I look at people up in really anywhere else in this country right now, and it's like getting fucking dark earlier than it is here already, and it's like colder than it is here already, and it just looks pretty rough. I can't believe we have to go into non-daylight savings time in like a couple weeks.
I don't understand. Why do we make it worse in the winter?
Everyone
it doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's regular time. The winter is regular time. And the good time is the altered time, which is daylight savings time.
But why don't we just do the good time all the time?
Yes, exactly. It should be. I agree.
Why do we make winter feel even worse? Yeah. I don't understand. We want it to be
well,
worse.
I guess what I'm saying is that
be.
we made summer feel better, not that we made winter feel worse. But we could just make daylight savings time the actual time, as far as I'm concerned.
We can make any time the actual time.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want.
We can do whatever we want. The Gregorian calendar is a farce. Yeah, what the daylight savings time was like what's the origin story? This is the kind of thing that I know my brain is bad because I re-Google it every single year of my life. The idea of aligning waking hours to daylight hours to conserve candles was proposed as a joke by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to like economize candle usage.
Wow. Proving that just like with Nazi jokes on Facebook, all jokes immediately become something that people believe sincerely.
Yeah.
1 in 20 people will hear your joke and think, that's a pretty good idea.
First as, no, I guess it's the opposite of
first as tragedy, then as farce.
Right, yeah.
Make tragedy farce again.
Yeah. I'm looking at a map. It looks like the North America and Europe largely do daylight savings time.
Well, Japan won't do it because culturally people don't leave work before it's dark, and people would basically
never leave,
have a complete psychological meltdown if you adjusted the clocks so that there was an extra hour of daylight where they could remain at work.
I'm looking at a map of the globe here. It looks like most of the world used to use daylight savings time, but
and then
now,
they were like, "What are we doing?"
Right, but now now doesn't. They all stopped with in South America. It looks like this map isn't labeled, so I don't know what these places are, but it looks like Chile still uses daylight savings time.
That one's easy to pick out on a map.
Exactly. There's one in the middle of South America that I shamefully cannot identify.
I'm not looking at the map.
Yeah,
I'm just guessing based on what's in the middle.
It looks like the more like metropolitan part of Australia still uses it, but it looks like basically...
Yeah, it does, because remember when I would be in Australia,
that,
sometimes the clocks would change there partway through my trip, and it would make the amount
the difference here was like 14 or 15 hours.
Even worse, yeah.
But it looks like all of Asia used to do it and now doesn't. It looks like Northern Africa and South Africa used to do it and now don't. It looks like the middle of Africa is the only place in the world that never did it. Yeah, there's not a good reason why it happens. The first serious proposal was by an entomologist who proposed the idea of changing the clocks because he wanted to have more daylight hours devoted to collecting insects.
No, absolutely not.
That's the first serious proposal.
Get up early. You're the one who likes to go do stuff with bugs. You can get up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Let the rest of us have a few hours of daylight after work. What the hell?
Yeah, anyway, this is our last main episode before we are in regular time again. Miserably, I think.
What if we just opt out? I refuse to acknowledge.
If we continue to live as though daylight savings, missing all of our meetings.
Well, what if you called your work and said, this is a sincerely held non-negotiable belief for me. The way people are doing with
how they don't want to get exemption
how they don't want to get a COVID vaccine. You don't want to participate
in
changing.
non-daylight savings
That's right.
time.
I don't believe in standard time.
Wow. It's a vanguard idea.
Well, I'm just putting it out there. 1 in 20, statistically, 1 in 20 of our listeners is going to think that's a pretty good idea, actually.
Because 1 in 20 people can be convinced of literally anything. Yeah. Well, all right. So we are doing a Halloween-themed episode. And that episode we decided, so I was like fucking around on the Dave's Garden forums at one point. Just a great site. I don't know if anyone spends much time there, but it's like the major, it's always delightful when a community of people exists outside of Reddit these days, like an actual forum that is still active somewhere that is not a subreddit. Seems like it should be celebrated. And Dave's Garden is one of those. But someone made a post on Dave's Garden that I've sort of had on our outline forever to maybe talk about. But we thought that maybe it would be appropriate for this Halloween episode. And the post reads, 7 cardinal sins of the garden. For years, I've been collecting gargoyle statues for my gargoyle garden. Recently, I've discovered an artist's collection of heads whose human faces represent the 7 cardinal sins: greed, lust, pride, envy, anger, sloth, and gluttony. I would love to develop a garden plot featuring each statue's head and the plant or plants which represent this sin in any way. Help, I need lots of suggestions from this knowledgeable Dave's Garden group. Pick the sin, suggest the plant, and why it might fit that sin.
I mean, this is a great post.
It's a great post, and the responses are good as well. Yeah, I don't know. I guess sin isn't exactly...
I was going to ask you why sin was Halloween themed in your mind, but then I realized it must be the gargoyles that you were thinking of.
Yeah, well, sin is an act of evil, right? And evil is Halloween-y. I mean...
None of the things on that list are spooky.
You don't think that gluttony is spooky? What about in
7?
I was going to say in Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory.
I wouldn't say Augustus Gloop is spooky.
I don't know. This works for me.
Willy Wonka is spooky.
Is spooky, yeah.
Absolutely. That guy's spooky as hell. Wait, who's spookier? Willy Wonka or Jigsaw? Who would you be most
Willy Wonka and
by?
Jigsaw are moral equivalents.
They're very similar, yeah.
Of course, for me, in my background, sin is merely separating oneself from God. But that's like a loser's definition of it, I think.
I feel like gluttony and greed are redundant in that gluttony harms no one unless you are consuming so many resources that it's preventing others from consuming resources.
Yeah, I mean, there's some redundancy in the 7 cardinal sins, or 7 deadly sins, as is maybe they're more commonly characterized as. But anyway, we're going to play the game. We're going to decide which plants we think best fit the 7 cardinal sins. Cardinal sin number 1, pride. So what's your thought process on this?
Well, I mean, we could think of a plant that is itself very haughty.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, stuff that's like the star of the garden. So like a corn or a tomato or a huge sunflower. We used to have big ass sunflowers in our garden that really dominated the landscape.
Or it could be a rare specimen, I guess.
Mm-hmm. One of them I thought about as an option for pride was actually like lawn grass, like something that supports the like the prideful attitude of people.
Yeah, I mean, a lawn is a great idea. Of course, I just brought up how hard it is to differentiate gluttony and greed, but lawn makes a powerful case for gluttony as it consumes a lot of resources and provides nothing.
Right.
But I think something ornamental is probably the best guess here.
What I ended up picking and selecting some descriptions for is the narcissus.
Sure, classic.
Classic, yeah. Which, the daffodil.
And classical.
And classical, right, yeah. Of which of course, the etymology of our word to be a narcissist, the daffodil being prominent among narcissi. And I picked out some descriptions from Fedco bulbs. Incidentally, the first 2022 catalog we received was not the main Fedco catalog, but the Fedco bulbs catalog.
Right. Time to think about your bulbs for spring.
Right. And Fedco says daffodils or narcissus. And to be clear, I think they're simplifying this here. The narcissus is a larger category of which daffodils are a prominent part, I believe. Daffodils or narcissus thrive in full sun and in dappled shade. Pink, orange, and red varieties hold their color longest during cool, wet springs. In a dry season, water late varieties in mid-spring to ensure bloom. They return year after year as long as the soil is well drained and the foliage is not cut until it has completely died back. Deer and other critters will not eat them as they are toxic. Cheerful, reliable, and dependable for beds, borders, cut flowers, forcing, and naturalizing. Do you want to read a few descriptions?
Sure. Professor Einstein Large Cup. Scarlet orange cup is a broad open disc with fine ridges and a highly notched rim. Rounded, overlapping, brilliant white petals. Plant in partial shade for best color. Registered in 1946, the professor won multiple awards in the 1950s.
Damn, Einstein getting his own daffodil in 1946.
Yeah, that would have been a good, what the fuck is that?
I know, right? He did such a good job on the Manhattan Project that... Wait, did he work on the Manhattan Project? I think he did, right? Hold on. Okay, good. Einstein played no role in the Manhattan Project, having been denied a security clearance in July of 1940 due to his being a pacifist.
Right.
Wow, what a huge nerd. Can't believe he didn't want to do nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would have known if he'd been involved in the Manhattan Project.
For some reason,
there were a lot of people in on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like Richard Feynman wouldn't have shut up about Einstein being involved because he, if for no other reason than that, I feel like I would have known about it. All right. Fortissimo large cup. Huge golden yellow overlapping petals with a giant-sized, lightly frilled cup, which opens apricot and turns deep burnished orange. Enormous flowers are vigorous in full sun, providing armloads for your vase and wows from your friends.
Armloads for your vase and wows from your friends.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Well, it's Fedco. They're a little whimsical. Read the last one, too.
Jetfire short. Long, bright orange ribbed cup and reflexed golden yellow, moderately starry petals. Slightly scented, good for forcing, tolerates shade and makes a nice counterpoint to the large trumpets blooming at the same time. Joanna's decades-old clump explodes with hundreds of flowers. This fire really lights up the garden and should burn a place in yours.
This fire really lights up the garden and should burn a place in yours is good.
Yeah,
I contest.
Sure.
What is forcing?
Forcing is when you bring the bulbs inside in the winter to make them blossom early so that you can get, which is why people have like Christmas. What do people famously force at Christmas? I think Narcissus, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the second of the cardinal sins, greed. What you're thinking here?
Well, greed is the spookiest of these sins.
Do you think so? I mean, it leads people down spooky paths, I guess.
Well, what would you nominate as spookiest then?
I mean, I guess anger?
I don't know. I'm pro anger. I've really come around on anger.
But I mean, that is like leads to violence, I guess, which is potentially spooky, but not always. I mean, I guess greed is more of like a psychological horror than like it doesn't manifest in the sort of like Jason or Freddy slicing you way that anger does. But
I'm still thinking about Willy Wonka and Jigsaw, to be honest.
How do you think plants can be greedy?
Well, of course, they can be resource hogs, though, again, I just previously mentioned that that's, I guess, more gluttony.
Sure. Yeah, gluttony and
So
greed
tough.
is a really tough distinction. I think we've come to that greed is something that is like actively harms in a way that gluttony is just about the doer.
So it should be either a plant that produces some kind of chemical defense that damages the other plants around it, or an active parasite.
Yeah, I did a little like digging on parasitic plants. Like there aren't many garden plants that are parasitic, but some that are the buffalo nut.
I don't know what that is. What is the buffalo nut?
It's a tree, or I guess it's a shrub, really. So I guess the plants that are characterized as parasitic are largely not capable of photosynthesis themselves. So they need some other way to get stuff. But I guess the buffalo nut shrub can photosynthesize, but
it just doesn't want to.
It just doesn't want to.
Well, that sounds like sloth.
Yeah. What it does usually do, though, is parasitize the roots of other tree species. When a buffalo nut seed germinates, it starts by throwing down a taproot. Once the taproot reaches a certain depth, lateral roots are sent out in search of a host. That's spooky, searching out a host. The roots sniff out the roots of other species by honing in on root exudates. When a suitable root is found, the buffalo nut root will tap into its host using specialized cells called haustoria. Once connected, it begins stealing water and nutrients. Buffalo nut roots have been known to travel distances of 40 feet in search of a host. Also, they make little nuts, little nice nuts.
Are the nuts good? Do people eat them?
I think so. Oh, no, actually not. I think it is poisonous. I thought it was edible because when I Googled, can you eat buffalo nuts? There are a bunch of recipes for buffalo nuts, but they are like buffalo spiced, like buffalo chicken and shit.
Buffalo.
When you buffalo something, it means to put it in butter and hot sauce, I think.
Wow. Okay.
But I think the buffalo nuts themselves are the actual ones. They're poisonous. Mistletoe is also parasitic.
Yeah, famously.
Another one I considered for this was the Lunaria silver dollar plant, which looks like coins for all the world. I thought that would be fun. But I sort of came down on maybe one of the better examples would be garlic, which like you can't plant it next to a lot of things that you would otherwise have in a garden because it steals their shit.
Yeah.
Specifically legumes, beans and whatnot. Apparently also lettuce and asparagus. If you plant garlic next to them, the garlic will succeed, but at the expense of those things typically.
It just outcompetes them.
It outcompetes them. I guess it uses the same, whatever the same nutrients are. I think with legumes, it's really any onion. You're not supposed to plant in the vicinity of the beans. But well, the third cardinal sin we will address is sloth.
Whoa. Okay, well, I mean, I had said a plant that's too lazy to photosynthesize, even though it can. But of course, something very slow growing.
Yeah, there's an obvious garden example for this, I think.
Yeah, what do you think about asparagus?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. It's slow in that it takes a long time to germinate, and it takes a long time to... I mean, I guess people
don't grow it from seed.
They rarely grow it from seed.
Ever.
But even if you do grow it from crown, it still can
take...
years,
2 years.
Can still take, right. Apparently, if you grow it from seed, it can take like 6 years, which is incredible. But even growing it from crown, it can take like 3 years. And apparently it also takes like up to 4 weeks to germinate, which is among the longest durations for a garden vegetable.
How did that ever come to be? How did we ever start cultivating that?
I don't know.
Sounds so arduous.
Yeah, I guess it's really good.
It is really good.
I don't think we've talked about this since maybe our earliest podcast, but asparagus was the vegetable that I hated most as a child because we got it like, I want to say it was in cans or
Oof.
it was like,
no.
it was so mushy.
Yikes.
Like it was so very mushy in my childhood eating of it. And the first time I had asparagus that was just like freshly cooked as an adult was like a revelation.
Well, if we talked about asparagus childhood moments before, then I probably mentioned that my family grew asparagus when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was like actively, I was very upset when my parents decided to till it under and stop growing asparagus because I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's really good.
Everyone agrees that it's fancy.
It's fancy. It's great tasting. It has a good mouthfeel, I think.
Yeah, you could just say texture and then it wouldn't be gross. But I think there's a tweet that's like asparagus grows like someone is trying to trick you into thinking this is how asparagus grows.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, fuck. It like looks absolutely wild.
I mean, it looks like asparagus just coming out of the dirt.
Yeah, it looks like just like when you... Right. How I imagine it is a plant that has like shoots of asparagus coming off of it. But what it looks like is just asparagus protruding from the ground as though it were like a finger or something. That's spooky.
That is spooky. That's got a ghoulish, zombie-like quality.
Yeah.
I love it.
Do you want to read a description?
Sure. I'll read this Johnny's Select Seeds description for Millennium asparagus. A cold hardy asparagus that maintains tip tightness as it grows. Since Millennium is well adapted to various soil types, including heavier soils, growers can utilize land previously unsuitable for asparagus production. Higher yielding than Jersey Supreme, and over a longer period, with more fern vigor and survival, the same spear size and spring emergence, and a higher proportion of male plants. Male plants are more productive for spears, while female plants drop seeds, overcrowding the bed and causing smaller spears, weed issues, and increased asparagus beetle and disease pressure. Bred by the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, Millennium is becoming the new industry standard for asparagus production.
Well, I wish someone would tell me that I maintained tip tightness as I grew. What a compliment. All right. Well, the fourth of the cardinal sins is anger.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I think we settled pretty rapidly on something that has like a violent defense mechanism as being appropriate for anger.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty obvious. What the concept should be. The
Sure.
exact choice is a little more difficult.
So there's stuff that's like poisonous, of course, whether to us or to other things. What's the deal with kidney beans?
Yeah, kidney beans make you horribly ill if you don't bring them to a rolling boil for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Is this the same thing with fava beans, or is the fava bean thing that sometimes you have a genetic thing where they will just kill you?
The fava bean thing is a genetic predisposition. The kidney bean thing is, I think, can happen to all humans. You know, most people buy cans of beans, but if you buy dried kidney beans, you have to bring them to a rolling boil or cook them, in a pressure cooker, something like that, to, I guess, denature this protein that can harm you. I don't remember the details of it currently. I do remember learning about it and freaking out a little bit.
Plants mostly have defense mechanisms. A lot of stuff is poisonous, but it's sort of the dose makes the poison issue for a lot of plants. I assume they're like, we can eat an apple, we can eat a bunch of apple seeds with no problem, even though there's arsenic in them.
Sure.
Because it's such a small amount. But presumably that is the arsenic's there because it's good at killing something that's not us.
Yeah, I don't know. So I guess the toxin is called phytohemagglutinin.
This is in the kidney bean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a glycoprotein. But I don't know what it evolved to defend against in this group of bean plants. Maybe it's something we've bred out of other beans. rather than something that was originally unique. I don't know.
Does something function?
Surely someone knows this, though.
Does something function successfully as a defense mechanism for a plant if it doesn't hurt or immediately harm the thing that's eating it? Like if it's something that
have to, I mean, the goal needs to be to poison you and then you survive, to never eat it again and communicate that it's bad to eat.
Right.
Like apparently a lot of times when people think they've gotten food poisoning, well, not a lot of times, but the symptoms are food poisoning like. So people can sort of easily think that they just got something that was
from something else that was contaminated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I guess every part of a potato plant that's not a potato is pretty poisonous.
Yeah.
The roots, the leaves, the stems, the flowers, especially the berries, are quite poisonous.
Mm.
Then, of course, there's the more direct route of a plant expressing its intrinsic anger, which is like having a violent physical defense mechanism in some way, like things that hurt.
Thorns,
spines.
Did you ever have like a barberry bush?
My family did not, no.
We had like these ornamental, I think they were barberries. They had these beautiful little berries on them, which I think were also poisonous. But they were like covered in really unpleasant thorns that would really like dig in deep and be hard to get out. And I think the house I grew up in maybe came with them, planted as an ornamental. And they were like the bane of childhood play. We would get covered in these thorns. Yeah.
I guess I interestingly learned while reading about this for the first time that there's a distinction between thorns, spines, and prickles. Like thorns are modified stems and they arise from buds, I guess. Like a thorn, like when you think of roses have thorns, roses don't have thorns. Thorns are they look like part of the plant. They're just like a sharp piece of branch, basically. Not like the little tiny sharp things. Those aren't thorns. Thorns are, I think, generally bigger.
I actually do vaguely know about this because there's like a plant Evo Devo person who studies like how these different pointy, sharp defense mechanisms develop. And I've heard her speak, but...
Right. So thorns are modified stems, but spines are modified leaves. And then prickles are essentially hair. They're like very coarse hair. So like technically speaking, many plants that we think about as having thorns or spines actually have prickles. Like most of what fucks us up is probably prickles on stuff.
But colloquially, we think of them all as thorns,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I thought one we could mention is the spiny chayote. We, of course, devoted a large part of one episode to chayote and ate some chayote. But maybe among the spiniest or prickliest, I guess, of fruits is the spiny chayote. But I was reading someone's blog where it's titled, "This vegetable is dangerous. Seriously, it will hurt you." He writes, "It's called a thorny chayote, and the thorns are no joke. My friend Jen wrapped it in a towel to bring it to my house. I could only manage to hold it for a little while. The only way I could do it was to gingerly cradle it in the palm of my hand so the weight was evenly distributed. Kind of like the concept behind those fun pin art toys that you always see in a science museum gift shop. But as soon as you shift it in your hand even a little bit, bam, you're going to get pricked. I pulled quite a few thorns out of my hands, like splinters. Yeah, they look pretty wild. I'll link to a picture of these. But I guess, yeah, I mean, it's essentially hair, but just really, really painful, prickly hair. I don't know why humans I don't know why humans ever persevered with this shit.
Well, hunger.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Wow, what a privileged life I lead. That I don't have to stab myself with thorns to eat. The fifth cardinal sin is envy. So this is a good one, I think.
So I think when we discussed this, we immediately thought, well, mimicry.
Yeah.
That's the phenomenon to target here.
Which exists throughout the plant and animal kingdoms.
Yeah, I mean, I think every multicellular group of multicellular organisms, there's probably some mimicry that's happening somewhere. Somebody's doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good idea.
I had pulled out rye and oat as two examples, which I guess humans had cultivated wheat before either of those two other grains. And as humans went to weed their fields of wheat, rye and also oat looked enough like the wheat that they were not weeded out. Or I guess maybe more accurately, the types of oat and rye that looked enough like wheat were not weeded out. Right. So to
be planted again.
Exactly. And that's known as weed mimicry or crop mimicry.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unintentional artificial selection.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's how we got rye and oat, apparently.
Wow, two of my favorite grains.
Yeah. You want to read a description?
I'll read the territorial seed description for winter rye. Rye is a cereal grain that should not be confused with ryegrass, which is for pasture, hay, lawns, and cover crop. Winter rye is planted in the fall and can germinate and grow very quickly in cool soils. The fast growth of winter rye suppresses even the most noxious of weeds and will do better than other grains in poor soils. It's the most cold-hardy of the grains, able to withstand negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Its long root structure will hold soils in place and prevent soil compaction and erosion, plus quietly siphon available nitrogen from the ground for recycling. In the spring, you can decide how to best utilize this unique crop. Use it as a green manure and return the biomass and recycled nitrogen back into the soil for the next crop. Use it for animal forage. Or just before seed set, you could cut and use it for a very clean mulch to be used around other crops, such as strawberries. Of course, you could let it fully mature and use the grain for making flour, rye bread, rye beer, or animal fodder. Winter rye is a grain that is quite happy to be grown with a legume like hairy vetch or crimson clover.
Allison, do you know that I, even at this very moment, am drinking rye?
I did not know.
I thought it would be appropriate. All right, well, the next one is an easy one, and that one is lust.
Horrible. Just horrible.
There are a couple of old favorites for this one.
Immediately, of course, we both said Peter Pepper.
Yeah.
That's the obvious choice.
The one that looks like a dick. The squirting cucumber. The one that does all the ejaculating in a really visceral way would be a good one.
Yeah, when you touch it, it like shoots seeds and goo out at you.
Yeah.
The Peter Pepper, just in case you haven't kept up with every episode of our podcast, the Peter Pepper really looks graphic.
It looks like it was designed to look like a human penis.
A circumcised one.
Specifically a circumcised one. That's right. So a fucked up human penis, I say, as a person who is circumcised myself against my will. That's right. I'm one of those guys who resents it. There are dozens of us. Dozens. But actually, we thought something we hadn't talked about yet, I don't think, on the podcast, is orchids.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really have talked about orchids much at all.
So this one sort of is mimicry also, in that I guess some orchids look enough like female wasps that male wasps fuck them.
Yeah, and actually many of these wasp orchid pairings are so specific that if the particular species of wasp that pollinates them goes extinct, there's a good chance that species of orchid will also go extinct.
Deeply reliant on one another. Wow.
Which, with all the bugs dying, is certainly a concern people have.
Yeah, for sure.
Never specialize on one pollinator.
Yeah, let that be a lesson to you.
It's like buying your whole portfolio full of game stonk.
So like with anything, the orchids want, I mean, I'm ascribing like desire to them, but they want to get their pollen all over the wasps, and then
Yeah, like anyone wants.
like anyone wants, right? And then for the wasps to spread that around. But I guess there are wasps that like fuck the orchids like I was reading about the first time scientists like looked at the orchids and found the wasp sperm on them too. Like the wasps fuck them too and ejaculate into the orchids.
Yeah, well, so I think part of maybe you read something about this. This is like a vaguely remembered thing. I think a huge part of the precision of the mimicry is, I mean, of course, it's about how they look to some extent, but it's about the orchid synthesizes an analog of the wasp pheromone.
Wow.
Because insects are so powerfully, they communicate
driven
so
by
much
pheromone,
with,
Man, that's really fascinating.
And they're very specific signals. They really mean one thing. Each one means something to someone.
Right. Let's get to the last of the 7 cardinal sins. This is one we've talked about a couple of times this episode already. Gluttony.
Yeah, this is the hardest one to think of as a sin, but it's a very easy one to think of garden plants that could be accused of it.
Well, we thought about lawn grass again for this guy. But ultimately, in my mind, this is an opportunity as we are approaching Halloween to read a description of a giant pumpkin.
Well, and you have insisted to me many times that giant pumpkins need to be fed cow's milk.
No, hold on.
Which does seem extra gluttonous for a plant.
I have not insisted this. What I've told you is that when my friends and I tried to grow a giant pumpkin as a kid, we were like told by, I don't know, some fucking guy,
adult.
Right? How did you get information at that point in 1992? Somebody told you, right? Somebody told us we had to pour cow's milk into the ground for our giant pumpkins.
And your families let you buy gallons of milk to dump on the ground?
I mean, honestly, I think we just stole our familial milk to do that. But I guess the established variety, like if you're going to grow a giant pumpkin, you're using a Dill's Atlantic Giant seed. At this point, like a lot of them get big, but if you're really going for prize winning, there's not really a other variety besides that you would go with. Do you want to read a Dill's Atlantic Giant description?
Sure, I'll read the park seed description for Dill's Atlantic Giant. Here it is. The gigantic pumpkin that holds the world's record for size. If you want to grow the pumpkin of your dreams, Dill's Atlantic Giant is the variety you must grow. It's easy to grow 400 to 500 pound golden orange fruits with this amazing variety, rough-skinned and beautifully ribbed. The pumpkins just keep going and going at an astonishing rate. You've got to try it for yourself. These pumpkins are exceptionally easy to grow, given adequate space and patience. Sow the seeds outdoors when danger of frost is past, or start indoors in peat pots. Plant the seedlings, or thin to 3 to 5 feet apart. So we've also discussed this, I think, quite recently, but can you imagine being burdened with a 400-pound mass of inedible pumpkin?
Right. I mean, if it's 400 pounds, it's not prize winning, but absolutely an unbelievable burden to have.
Yeah.
I looked up more about these pumpkins, and I thought that this story sort of fit in many of the vices we've discussed today. But I guess there was a Dill's Atlantic Giant seed that sold for $1,600 a single seed.
Was this like an internet trick?
So, just to see how pumpkin size inflation has occurred throughout the years, in 1984, the top pumpkins were weighing in at like 450 pounds. Yeah. At a 2010 auction, a buyer paid $1,600 for a single seed, which came from the then all-time record holder pumpkin that weighed in at 1,810 pounds. It was grown by Chris Stevens, a Wisconsin pumpkin enthusiast.
And they did that because they wanted to eat it?
No, they wanted to grow their own fucking huge-ass pumpkins with it. I guess Dill's Atlantic Giant seeds, just like standard seeds, can cost from about $1 a seed to $40 a piece.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. Depending on how good the seed is, I guess. I don't know how you tell what constitutes a $40 versus a $1 Dill's Atlantic Giant seed.
Well, and you're certain this person wanted to plant that seed and not have it as a memento or something? That's such an exorbitant price to pay.
Yeah, that seems to be what's implied here. The biggest pumpkin as of this current moment is a 2,624 pound pumpkin. This is from 2020.
Wow.
Although apparently as of 2021, there's an Italian who's growing. So this is hot off the fucking presses. This is an article from October of 2021. I'm reading this here. There's an Italian that is, I guess his pumpkin's still growing, and the estimated weight is currently over 2,700 pounds. So there may be a new record holder this year, a Tuscan named Stefano Cutruppi. So keep an eye on that.
I don't understand. So it's still growing, even though, so he knows that it's defeated, that it will have set a record, but he doesn't want to harvest it yet because the official judging can't happen yet. Or like, I would be worried that if I left it unharvested, something bad would happen to it.
Right. I mean, I'm not exactly sure when these get harvested. It's possible this is an article from early October. Maybe it's been harvested now. There's apparently another Belgian who has one that
they're going head to head.
They're going head to head. His is also competitive. So
wow.
I don't know. Hopefully we'll get some more clarity on this. I'll try to do some further investigation. Okay, that's it. Happy Halloween. If you're so inclined, you can elect to follow us on Twitter at @CDBusiness or on Instagram at CDBusinessPod. You can email us at cdbusinesspod@gmail.com. Let us know if you want us to talk about a particular catalog, or if you leave us a review, we will read it. And as long as... That's not good. As long as... That's no good. And as long as...
This is deeply unpleasant for me. I can't
so
put up with this anymore.
It's so long.
You can't do shit like this. You have to stop.
Eat your vegetables.
We're all just doing the best we can.
Speak for yourself.
It's city business. It's city business. Boring talk about seeds, city talk between boys. Mind-numbing chatter about our mules and spores. We'll dig a ditch and moan and split the difference. City business.